So, considering how much is at stake for Japan if China were to take over Taiwan, how is it that there are Japanese politicians who might not be supportive of Taiwan, that are pro-China?
I think there's basically probably two groups that fall into that category. One would be those that are either pro-China for ideological reasons, or they're pro-China because they've basically been captured in something called elite capture, where they're under the control or influence of a foreign country, and they may be under that control for financial reasons or a personally embarrassing or politically embarrassing compromising situation that they found themselves in. Unfortunately, many of the politicians and business leaders in Japan are said to be in a situation like that, where they've been in a very compromising situation under Chinese influence. Let's put it that way. So that would be one group, those that are under Chinese influence or sympathetic to China. The second group would be those that are just unfortunately ignorant about the geopolitical and geostrategic consequences or the significance of Taiwan. In either case, I make the point in my respective commentaries and op-eds that those two types of individuals should not be sent to Tokyo to represent the people of Japan. In other words, if they're representing China, or they're so ignorant of the geostrategic situation that they would have to start studying once they got into office. In either case, it's too late. They shouldn't be there.
Well, you said that earlier that like when China goes for Taiwan, they would likely attack Japan or Japanese forces as well. Is that something that's not really been considered? Because, I mean, what is the thinking there that Japan would not strike back after it was attacked?
There are discussions in military, political, strategic circles about that. Japan has certain capabilities to do it, but it's lacking in other capabilities. So I don't want to go into that detailed response right now, but that would be one aspect of it. The other problem, and this precedes that strategic discussion, is that quite often the portrayal of a Taiwan contingency in Japan through mainstream media lenses is that a Taiwan contingency is a U.S.-China issue, that it has nothing to do with Japan. And unfortunately, the mainstream media makes that story up constantly. So every time Taiwan's reported in Japan, it tends to be introduced as, the result of tensions between the United States and China, rather than as a real existential threat to Japan itself.
Why is that reported that way?
Well, I think, first of all, the Japanese media, like our media back home in the States, in some cases tends to be bought off by the highest, bidder. So some media outlets are, I think, influenced by Chinese, by the Chinese market, or advertisers who do business with China. The Japanese Business Federation has immense political support in Japan, and they are very closely aligned with China. They see that the Chinese market is a good thing. They want to have close ties with China. They try to prevent politicians from raising, the issues that China represents for Japan. And similarly, the companies that advertise with the Japanese media will tend not to go in that direction about the threat that China, presents. But I think the other thing is just more ideological. The media here tends to be, on the left and has a very maybe pacifist view of the world, that China's intentions are, benign, or they're certainly not as malign as some of us think they are. So probably there's a profit motive or a profit incentive not to talk about China in those terms. And then there may be those ideological aspects as well. And then there's a third, more nefarious angle to it, and that's that there are certain agreements that the Chinese government has worked out with Japanese media that in order to station correspondents or to have offices in China, they're not allowed to report on either certain things or in a certain way. And unfortunately, the Japanese media outlets, even the conservative ones, tend to follow that to the to the letter. And so a lot of information doesn't get out of China into Japan that Japanese viewers, should be able to hear.
This really sounds like the Chinese Communist Party's playbook in all other countries. Influence the business sector, they influence the politicians, directly buy off politicians, buy off the media entities. This could be any country.
Exactly. And the more that, those of us in the United States, or myself in Japan and other countries, we explore more about Chinese political warfare, for example, and the more we communicate about that, the more we could see the patterns that have developed.
How does the Japanese public see China? I'm curious because, what you're talking about, the media influencing the politicians, the business people influencing the media and the politicians, has that reached the Japanese public? Do they also see China as kind of benign? I'm also wondering because there is such nationalistic anti-Japan sentiment used in mainland China all the time by the Chinese Communist Party. Does that bleed over, or is it more what they're hearing through Japanese media?
Very much like what's happening trend-wise in the U.S. as well, that there's been a shift away from mainstream media to alternative media and internet media. The same things happen, fortunately, in Japan too. And so, as I alluded to at the beginning, the Japanese public, I think, is actually far ahead of politicians, for example, and certainly far ahead of the mainstream media on these international issues. And so very few people that I'm aware of, buy what the media is telling them, which is a very healthy thing, because you should always question any information that you hear, or be skeptical of it. And for the most part, I think the Japanese people are. Now, today, by chance, and when I say today, it's October 20th here in Japan, in the evening news, there was a report about a brand new public opinion poll that's done by a private NPO, and they've been doing regular polling of Chinese Japanese relations. As far back maybe as a decade ago, I remember seeing one of their polls in 2012, but it shows that 90.1% of the Japanese people have negative views of China.
Wow. Yeah.
So that is actually higher than in the United States. And you all would have seen the Pew Research data earlier this year, I think. So obviously, it's one data point. So I have to do more research into it. But that's been very consistent. And back in the poll that I alluded to before from 2012, interestingly, the public opinion in Okinawa Prefecture, which has been really victimized by Chinese political warfare over the years, particularly the past 18, 19 years or so, public opinion is actually very strong against China too, and it was stronger than mainland Japanese public opinion. So basically, that means that the closer you are to China, the more wary, the more cautious you're going to be of them. So the public doesn't always buy what the politicians and the media says.